Hello and welcome to the KPI Institute's webinar, KPIs that never get old. My name is Andrei Costea and I will be your host for today, along with our presenter, Raluca Vintila. This webinar is part of a series of free educational materials that aim to enhance the knowledge and know-how of those interested, while also creating a bridge between us as a company and you, our public. The KPI Institute is a research organization specialized in business performance. It operates research programs in 12 practice domains, each linked to a specific certification course, ranging from strategy and KPIs to employee performance, and from customer service to innovation performance. Today, 15 years after the KPI Institute was created, we can proudly say that our products and services have reached professionals on 5 continents and that our public comprises a worldwide community of around 8,400,000 members online and 30,000 registered companies on smartkpis.com. Today's webinar will be exploring KPI examples that are popular, rarely become outdated, and will be reflected in the KPIs architecture one way or another. The presentation will be delivered by Raluca Vintila, management consultant within the KPI Institute. Raluca Vintila is a performance management professional whose focus revolves chiefly around the performance management system architecture at the organizational, divisional, and individual levels, as well as facilitating our flagship program, the Certified KPI Professional. So far, Raluca's training and advisory sessions count has reached 22 countries on 4 continents and over 3,500 participants. This presentation will last approximately 30 minutes. Please feel free to ask any questions you might have during the webinar, as they will be picked up and answered at the end of the presentation in our Q&A session. Enjoy the KPI Institute's webinar, KPIs that never get old. Now I would like to invite Raluca to begin her presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good evening, good morning, depending on your time zone. I'm very happy to be your host today. To give you a brief on the topics we're going to cover, a part of the core of the webinar, which will go through some technicalities about KPI examples that rarely tend to lose importance. It's quite intriguing to say that they never get old. Like, are they really immortal KPIs or what? That will be the core subject. We will enter some of these technicalities as in the second topic. The first topic, we will have a brief introduction about what are these KPIs we keep talking about and how do they make a difference in measuring performance and why should we bother having such a system. Afterwards, we will discover the scenarios where we could find ourselves apart from the immortality of the KPIs, because there are some other scenarios as well, and I would like you to go through all these. Why? Because on the long run, it is preferable to be prepared for the options you might be facing and to know how to handle each and every. Sometimes people feel that if it's something happening and they haven't been through the same stage previously, they get surprised. They don't know exactly how to react, although it is natural. Last but not least, we will end up discovering the 2 main important tools that bring to life this KPI system that help us in reporting data for decision-making purposes, because otherwise it makes no sense to have the most beautiful, the state-of-the-art KPI system design unless it is not active and unless it does not generate value. In the end, we will get a chance to have a short Q&A session, and I would like to highlight from this, from the very beginning, that stay tuned to the follow-up emails that will reach your inboxes in the upcoming days, because you will get a surprise over there. Well, what are the KPIs and how do they make a difference? Well, if you got the chance up to this moment to explore the smartkpis.com database, most likely you have observed that there is a certain rigorosity that we address the moment we even write the KPIs. I took the freedom to extract some examples from the database, which is the largest database of KPIs documented at the moment in the world. I encourage you to explore some examples based on your functional areas, or maybe on your industry or your simple interest, to get some inspiration about what others are measuring. Um, they are key performance indicators, key because they measure something that really makes sense at the moment. For instance, these are the strategic objectives. That's what makes an indicator being a key indicator, not just a simple data. They reflect performance levels, or they have this capacity of exposing performance levels, and indicators because, as you can see, they have the capacity of being purely quantifiable. Purely quantifiable. In terms of the naming standards, we use 3 symbols, and you will see all our examples that we're utilizing these symbols for the KPIs. It's either the monetary value captured, the volume, or the percentage. I know it's something very simple, but take it as a best practice. Even the KPIs, or the performance measure you are keeping track at the moment, and review them in accordance to these naming standards. It really makes a difference to say during a meeting that projects completed have been 50, and you can understand that the volume, I mean 50 projects have been completed as a volume, or in case you translate that into a percentage, it will become 50%, and that's quite a significant difference if you take into account the completion of 1,000 projects out of 2,000, or simply 50 out of 52 maybe projects completed. Therefore, the symbol in front is facilitating not only its reading the way it is written, but it facilitates the communication. It's crystal clear, I would say, the moment to place this symbol in front of the KPI. So take it as one of the best practices we encourage organizations to do. It's something small that can bring a huge difference and a huge improvement in the way people work, or in the way organizations are addressing the KPIs issue. But let's say I've told you that they become key because they reflect performance levels that go in accordance to what we intend to have. Well, in the way we approach the KPIs, they arrive into our lives the moment they measure strategic intentions or strategic objectives. Therefore, before having the strategic objectives, we need to look after the organizational identity, and as well to the organization's intentions. If such a scheme was not developed before the moment of KPIs appearing, I would say you need to double check whether they are really key performance indicators, or some simple indicators that reflect maybe processes or some data, but not talking really about what makes a key difference in strategy execution. So we place KPIs in the context of strategy, and measuring the strategy execution, actually measuring the objectives, strategic objectives achievement. For instance, as a research institute, we are a research institute that as well provides educational services and consulting services. In terms of the research component, we are constantly releasing research studies. We are conducting research studies, either primary and secondary. Therefore, for the core of our business, ensuring the relevancy of the frameworks that we are utilizing for strategy planning, for KPIs measurement, for benchmarking, it really makes sense for us, and it makes a difference to make sure that what we are promoting is still relevant in the field, with the practitioners, with the best practices, and the frameworks are still in use. Therefore, a KPI that would measure this objective would be the number of secondary research studies that we are launching for each professional domain. And to indicate performance, the expected level of result, or the target for this KPI would be, just for the sake of the example, number 4. So we would like to have launched 4 secondary research studies. I prefer, as you have observed, to say desired level of results instead of the word target, because as per my observations in practice, the word target comes with a negative feeling or negative reactions or emotions from people's side. Therefore, you can replace the word with the desired level of results. As you can see, the objectives we are working on and we are promoting are not defined in accordance with the popular and super popular SMART methodology. Well, we prefer not to use the SMART methodology, but a decomposed manner. But before getting to the decomposed manner of defining objectives, let's go a little bit through the acronym of the SMART. Well, it is well known. So specific, the S comes from specific. Then it's measurable. With the A, sometimes it is debatable whether it is attainable or assignable. The R comes from realistic and the time bound. Well, at the moment it has been first published, the A came from assignable, and it really makes sense to be assignable instead of attainable, because attainable to a certain extent is overlapping the realistic side or the realistic characteristic. And our system, based on these concepts, is seen as a decomposed in a decomposed manner, because we don't define only one objective that has all these characteristics inside a single statement, but we break down the statement into multiple elements that would still, I would say, they are still in compliance with the SMART methodology. The only difference is that it's not a single sentence, but different, the separate elements of the SMART in different, even different fields in the reporting tools. So for us, the specific comes through the lens of the objective, through our strategic intentions, because they are the ones being specific. For instance, it is specific in terms of increasing profitability. I do refer to profitability. It can become specific through the lens of customer satisfaction or employee engagement. And afterwards, the measurable feature comes with the help of the KPIs, the key performance indicators, that have this capacity of quantifying, being measurable. It becomes assignable to the KPI owner or the person in charge of making the making decisions that would correct the KPI results as per reaching the targets. That's when we talk about being realistic. And the time frame, because they have as well a dedicated, I mean, not only a standard reporting frequency, but the target itself is established either per year, per quarter, per month, depending on the KPI nature. So the time is as well embedded in this decomposed system. To give you an example of the two options in comparison, if we would have the SMART approach to define one objective, it will sound like this. Ensure the efficiency of IT services delivery by reaching 80% of requests solved within 48 hours by the end of the financial year under IT director coordination, blah, blah, blah. It's extremely long, as you can see. And there's just one KPI inserted in the sentence. We recommend not to utilize only one KPI to measure the objective's achievement. Therefore, a minimum of 2 should be taken into account. Now, imagine how long the sentence would be if you have 3 or 4 KPIs with corresponding targets and the time frame and the owner in a single statement. Well, we believe this is too complex to work with. Therefore, we prefer the option number 2 that you can see in the decomposed manner, where all the elements from above are reflected in separate fields underneath. The benefit would be that it's easier to work with this decomposed or breakdown approach, as it perfectly aligns the balanced scorecard methodology, and especially the scorecard, which is, I would say, the most important performance management tool. That's where the KPIs appear. But we will get to the performance management tools in our last topic for today. But at least to get an idea on what does it mean and how does it look like. Well, so these are the KPIs we keep talking about, researching, discovering. But the thing is, why should we bother with such a system? The three keywords that professionals and practitioners keep on answering to us is the fact that KPIs bring clarity. They are giving clarity to the data that is provided in the tools. It's clear where you are, and afterwards you know where to focus. So clarity and focus, along with the improvement, because it's in between where you are and where you would like to be, as a comparison between your current state and your desired state. In between is the space of improvement and the space where you could perform. Clarity, data, focus. Through the strategic objectives, you focus on what matters most. And the improvement as the space in between, improvement generated through the corrective actions that are addressed through the decision-making process that is enabled by the performance data available. So generally, these are the three key ideas, or the main three ideas that professionals and practitioners, even in the training courses, they keep saying that, okay, they complain. I mean, they complain because it's a lot of work around this system, but the moment I'm asking, okay, why do you still do it? These are the key words that their explanations go around. Now, given the fact that we have this brief and like a summary about the KPIs and an introduction, now is the best moment to explore some technicalities behind some popular KPI examples, as my colleague has mentioned, popular KPIs or KPIs that rarely lose their importance. As you have seen, we promote the idea of KPIs being placed in the context of strategy or of strategic objectives. It's not like I'm getting a list and I'm just integrating it into my daily work. I'm going to measure what the others are measuring. It is important to calibrate the system to make it in accordance to the strategic objectives of an organization, of a department, or business units, because they should be measuring strategy execution. They should be embedded in the strategy execution system. But the moment we start defining strategic objectives and we conduct the KPI selection workshop, we end up with some KPI examples that keep being repeated from one environment to the other. I would say they are not 100% applicable to each and every entity that is measuring performance, but consider them as being some popular KPI examples. As I have told you, I don't really think they are immortal KPIs, but they have a high likelihood of being immortal, or a high likelihood of being maintained from one performance management cycle to another as a long run fit. The way we are going to discover these KPI examples, popular KPI example, is aligned with the balanced scorecard methodology. And I've been thinking about choosing a KPI from each of the traditional perspectives of the balanced scorecard: financial, customers, internal processes, and people learning and growth, as the mix of these four is making the magic happen for our strategy and performance management. First of all, for the financial perspective, the example, the popular example is budget variance, percentage budget variance. It measures the gap or the difference between actual and planned budget. So the subordinate measures would be realized and planned budget. So what you have been consumed out of what you've been planning to consume. The calculation formula is realized over planned minus planned over the plan, and you will end up with a percentage that will range from minus 100 to plus 100. So you can be utilizing more budget than you have been planning to, and you can utilize less than you've been planning to utilize. So these are two scenarios that can occur. Let's take the two examples. For instance, your realized budget was $100,000, so you've been spending $100,000, and your planned budget was only 50,000. Your budget variance in this case will be positive. It will be 100%. Why? Because you've been requesting double to complete the project, let's say, or to realize, you've been requested the double of your planned amount, and it would be positive. But you can be as well on the other side when your realized budget is 40,000 and your planned budget this time was 50,000. So in this case, your budget variance would be negative, would be minus 20%. The question is, which of the situations is favorable as per identifying the favorable trend of this KPI? Well, people have the tendency to say that this KPI should be having negative results, 0 or negative results, saying that, or at least as a general answer that I received to this question, saying that, look, in the second scenario, so the one on the right-hand side, we've been saving $10,000. Well, I would say it depends, but in this case, it does not really depend on on the context. The thing is, generally, as a conclusion, we think that we should not be requesting more money than the money we would actually need. Now it's just a $10,000 difference. It can become millions. And you would still pretend that you've been saving money. We accept the situation of saving money, but we think that the planning process, the budget planning process, should be rigorous enough as per not having any type of variance. The thing is, in the second scenario, you have been blocking $10,000, which could have been someone else's money to utilize in implementing other initiatives or other projects or to do something else. So the money have been blocked for a certain amount of time. Of course, I would not debate on the first scenario because the financial representatives will get mad. You will be requesting extra money to finalize the job or your intentions to get the benefits of realization. None of the scenarios is favorable. What we think is that a favorable trend for this KPI would be within a certain range. Of course, this certain range should be as close to 0 as possible, but generally the 0 is quite utopic to be achieved. Therefore, having a favorable trend within a range for this KPI means that it could be acceptable, the green area or the green threshold that you can see somewhere between minus 3% and plus 3%. So to have a small range that is acceptable, as close to 0 as possible, and afterwards to be followed by the yellow lines and then by the red. Now, when it comes to what kind of number should I place in here in the threshold, this is just for with an illustrative example. It can be 2%, it can be 2.5. The purpose now is to understand how it works and how it should be approached. Even the percent itself, 3%, in certain business contexts, it might mean $10,000, but in certain business contexts, it can mean millions of dollars. So be mindful the moment you set up these targets and thresholds. Just for the sake of the example, I would like to explain here the way it looks the moment of the reporting. So being within range, makes it in here close to zero, so between -3% and +3% is the green area, which is embraced by the yellow thresholds. Yeah, because it works on both sides, it's either minus or the plus, to cover both scenarios. And then as the proposed range, whatever goes less than 5% or more than positive 5%, it's the alert. Imagine that those variances, budget variances, are taking place, are not isolated cases around your organization. HR department has a high budget variance. On the other hand, the IT is requesting more money for equipment. The team in charge of suppliers, again, has different needs. And we keep asking for more money that we have been budgeting, and the whole organizational budget will get destabilized. On the other hand, if we keep proposing or planning certain budgets just because we fear that some obstacles might appear, and maybe we would like to insert a buffer of, let's say, 10,000 US dollars although you know that you might not use this money, it's still inconvenient for others because you are taking their chance of utilizing some money that could create an impact on strategy execution and getting closer to the desired state of the organization. This KPI indicates something that most of the organizations would like to have, either public, private, NGOs, being disciplined or maintaining a financial discipline, being disciplined in the way you administer your financial resources, on the way you execute your budgets. This can be quite a useful KPI for to control the costs. Of course, it has some limitations, but the thing is, budget, the deviation analysis, it's a direct way of controlling the organizational financial discipline in terms of budget execution in according to the initial terms that have been agreed upon. Going further to the customer side, a popular example and quite famous in the last years, I would say, is the Net Promoter Score. So the Net Promoter Score, which sometimes people tend to confuse it with the percent customer satisfaction. How do we calculate this? Well, we calculate this based on surveys. Of course, the results can be altered by the respondents' subjectivity or incentives given by the organization to stimulate their responses. The Net Promoter Score is nowadays used by many large organizations as one way of getting customer feedback, let's say. It is important to understand how it is calculated, and based on the results to calibrate a strategy that conveys each of the categories that you might end up with. For instance, to get the score, the percent Net Promoter Score, the subordinate measures are promoters, detractors, and the total number of customers that are answering to the question. Of course, we would like it to be with a favorable trend increasing. I mean, to having the results of these KPIs reaching up to 100%. But let's see, how do we get the data for this KPI? Well, to get the data for the Net Promoter Score, we need to collect answers to a single question. The question is how likely you are to recommend a product or service to your friends and colleagues. Of course, it is the product or the service that you have been experiencing or utilizing. Most likely, you've been answering such a question up to this moment in your lifetime. Now you will understand how the organizations get and how do they interpret the results for these. The scale goes from 0 to 10. Whoever answers from 0 to 6, it is considered to be a detractor. The 7 and 8 are considered to be neutrals, and the last scores of 9 and 10 are considered to be promoters. So you can end up with the results of this KPI, again, on a range from -100 to +100. It means that you can have more detractors than promoters. So people saying in the market or promoting a negative image of your organization given the experience that they have had with your products or services. That's when you get to the minus area. To get as well an illustrative view on this, within this range, it is favorable to be maybe up to 70%, somewhere between 50 and 70% to have the yellow threshold and afterwards the red. As you can see, it is different as compared to the budget variance, which favorable trend was within a range. The thing is, the percentages in here are quite debatable from one industry to the other. They have to be calibrated. For instance, years ago, some organizations with high net promoter score were names such as Harley Davidson. Even Amazon has a high net promoter score. It's like the brands that are already well known. Harley Davidson doesn't necessarily have to give you a flyer or an ad that would encourage their customers in buying one of their motorbikes, because it's a well-known, it has a certain fame as an organization to be providing high quality products. Well, Net Promoter Score going for the customer side. I would wish to each and everyone attending this webinar to stay on the positive side. As you can see, it's not difficult, positive and as high as possible. It is not difficult to capture data for this KPI. It's just a matter of creating a system to collect the answers. Going further to the internal processes. In here, the KPI is active running projects on time, on budget, and according to specifications. Saying that again, active running projects on time, budget, and specifications. So this is not just a double trouble, but it is a triple trouble in the moment we calculate the data for this. Of course, the favorable trend is increasing. For this KPI, it has like an overview around the portfolio of projects. It measures the percentage of projects that are in the process of being implemented that are in accordance with all these three features. It's also a matter of indicating the quality and as well the efficiency, because it's a matter of using the time and the money in the running current projects of an organization. But mostly it gets connected to idea of project quality and project management. Time, budget, and specifications. As a data collection method for this KPI, a portfolio of active running projects can provide insights into the budget expenditure, the process, the progress that each and every project is doing in accordance maybe to the Gantt chart or the list of activities. It has its limitations. Generally, it should be used as an enterprise portfolio of projects as a system to have a centralized project status report. You will have, for instance, a list. This is the list of running projects. We have 50. 10% are 10 of the projects are on time. 5 of the 50 projects are on budget, and only 3 out of 50 are going according to specifications. It means that your KPI result for this would be 3/50 times 100, the result for this KPI. So we are taking into account the ones that that are compliant with the 3 features altogether. Of course, if this is too complicated, and I would say is the most complex way of capturing project capacity into KPIs, you can just limit yourself to active running projects on time, or active running projects on budget, so that you can forecast in case there is some extra budget that would be required, and the specifications as well. So you can have them as 3 standalone KPIs and maybe having only 1 or 2 active on the long run to activate the third component of the specifications as well. I quite have a doubt. I would prefer personally the idea of having on time and budget. I know that according to specifications, it's important as well, but generally people have the tendency, if they if they intend to produce grapes, I'm quite confident they will not produce apples or oranges. So being in accordance with the specifications can be something that that can be let's say eliminated in the first phase, and maybe when you get to a more mature way of approaching projects and their progress, to have this complex KPI that we are proposing in here. Last but not least is the perspective of people learning and growth, which sometimes gets to be eliminated from the performance management structures of organizations. Generally, because we are reviewing a lot of websites of organizations, a lot of annual reports, performance reports, we manage to see data about the financial component. I would say that's the one that is rarely missing, and sometimes about the customers. Rarely you get the chance to get into the internal processes like specific industry or business specific KPIs. But for the people learning and growth, what we see is generally the number of training hours offered to the employees, which doesn't really make sense if you've been offering 8 hours or 24 hours a year to each employee, because it does not guarantee the effect of the training, or you cannot see the impact on the competencies level. But anyways, numbers about female to male ratio, or maybe some numbers about the number, the head count of the organization, but something more in depth or something more meaningful for the business, we don't really see. We don't really get a chance to see in these sources. Therefore, the super popular KPI for people learning and growth, whenever we get the chance to see it, it's the employee engagement index. Well, up to this moment, as you have seen, the type of KPI was quite specific. One was within a range with a certain calculation formula. The second one for the Net Promoter Score, the different view on this. Even the active projects was an increasing trend with the distinct formula. Now, for the people learning and growth, this KPI is calculated based on survey, with, of course, a favorable increasing trend. What does this measure, the employee engagement index? Well, it measures the level of commitment of employees into their work activities, into their responsibilities, but in terms of enthusiasm, of their intentions, and the way they enjoy to be doing executing their activities and responsibilities. An objective that would fit this one would be, of course, the increase in employee engagement, because you would like it to be as high as possible. This KPI is impacting as well the turnover rates, and it leads, because it is at the bottom of the pyramid. The people in the people perspective, it is influencing as well the internal processes. So the extent to which people are committed to their work is going to impact the processes that they are deploying, and the interaction with the customers will be affected by this, which will lead to influence the profitability of the organization, or let's say the financial, the financials of the organization. The threshold for this is expressed up to 100. As a proposal, which would be like the scores above 95, and between 75 and 95, and less than 75 would be the red. The thing is, these are again some proposals from our research, considering that you should be having the engagement of at least, I mean, to consider that not everyone will be engaged or super satisfied about the work, to get it as a, I mean, to consider it as a natural, the human nature is being natural to have this presence of people. It would be as well quite utopic to think that everyone is super happy there, everyone is living the dream within the organization and stuff like this. We're not really living on a cloud. It's not only honey and sugar, but the thing is to get a large population of employees to be committed and to be engaged in this. The survey that is the most popular for for calculating the employee engagement is developed by Gallup. It has the 12 questions. That's why the popularity. It has the Q12 of the Gallup. They have been identifying some of the elements that contribute to engagement, and they're applying these questions to get the translation into the index. That's why it is an index, because it has multiple dimensions inside inside the calculation. I would say this is the most famous one. The questions in there are something like, one of the questions is whether you have a best friend at work. Well, I would say it's more or less about the teamwork, but it sounds quite, I mean, as I have told you, like like sitting on a cloud to have best friends at work. Of course, you can feel, you can enjoy it, but it's not really like a mandatory condition to have best friends. The thing is, or the questions I personally resonate with more are the ones that refer to the relationship maybe with the manager, with your colleagues, that refer to your possibilities of growth in there. For instance, some of the question is like whether you feel that your opinion is taken into account the moment you express it, which is something, I mean, it's one of the tough questions as compared to having a best friend at work. If you feel encouraged at work for your development, these are some of the tough questions and the best excuses to initiate discussions, manager to employee, to ensure a higher level of engagement throughout the organization. Very popular, the employee engagement nowadays. There are studies that suggest that the engagement can drive various efforts and benefits at the same time, such as identifying the areas that could be developed, either as soft skills or hard skills of the employees, giving them a sense of trust, and why not integrity the moment they are operating their activities. Well, that would be the last perspective of the balanced scorecard, the people learning and growth with the employee engagement that should be captured around here through the use of a survey. Other examples that are falling in as, let's say, are considered to be popular KPIs that appear, the financial one for operating expenses, capital expenditure, net profit margin, of course. There are, I mean, even some, they're quite famous and well known in terms of what do they measure. The Stratex budget spend is something quite unique, as it conveys to the incentives or initiatives that are associated to strategy execution, like ensuring a proper funding in the organization, or organizational buy-in and strategy execution. It's the budget dedicated to strategy and strategy execution initiatives, which is quite unique and interesting. Cost avoidance savings and cost savings, which are two standalone indicators. It's like two sides of the same coin. I mean, they both deal with the reduction in expenses. The difference is that the cost avoidance savings is, I mean, is translated into avoiding future cost, or actually avoiding incurring cost in the future, while the cost savings are, for instance, to give you some examples, the decision to reduce overtime hours, or negotiating prices for products or services, yeah, getting a lower rental fee for your facilities, or for your equipment. That would be the cost savings, where the cost avoidance savings would include some examples, such as securing a price that is lower than the original quoted quoted price, or maybe getting, for instance, to get free training. I mean, additional services at no extra cost. That would be the avoidance. The thing is, the cost savings indicator appears in financial statements, while the cost avoidance savings, it's let's say, tracked in a more isolated manner. If there is no mechanism established within the organization to make sure that the financial benefits are obtained, they will be most likely not achieved, or maybe not being clearly tracked to have such an to have data for such an indicator. Others would be the customer satisfaction, quite famous. I would say is the basic level of having the Net Promoter Score. The complaints you are receiving indicating mostly the dissatisfaction of people, but in a more objective manner rather than the satisfaction. Your capacity of solving their complaints within a service level agreement, maybe within 24 hours, within 48 hours, depending on what is internally established. In terms of the processes, you can calculate the processes optimized or on-time deliveries. This is the part of quality, whether you've been delivering on time with no errors or not. It's part of the processes, the way people operate. And for the people, of course, before going to employee engagement, you can calculate employee satisfaction. If they are dissatisfied and disengaged, most likely will have a high employee turnover rate. People will leave your organization. Is going to be like coming and going. And another popular example goes for, as I have told you, not only the number of training hours that is offered by the company to the employees, but as well the competencies that reach a desired level. So percentage of employees with competencies at desired level. That would be another example for KPIs for the people learning and growth. Well, these are, let's say, the the KPIs that have the high likelihood of being immortal. Well, placing these possibilities in a KPI lifecycle, this scenario would go on the evolution stage, or the third stage. For instance, at the beginning, when you decide to work with the KPI system, you need to select the KPIs, document the KPIs, collect data for the first time for these KPIs, and make some decisions. In the second stage, you will do some, let's say, fine tunings to the system. You will get an improved way, or an improved version of your PMS. On the long run, there are 4 possibilities you can find yourself into. So you are working with the KPIs now, let's say, for about 1 year or 1 year and a half, of course, depending on the size of the organization and the speed that is organization intends to implement this. Well, let's explore these 4 scenarios of the evolution stage. The maintain scenario, or the maintain KPIs, are these immortal KPIs that we have just been discovering, or not immortal, but having the likelihood of appearing from one cycle to the other, which are talking about generally about the financials. You will always care about your customers to be satisfied and processes to be optimized. It's like the type of KPIs that have, as I have told you, the likelihood of being present in your performance life from 1 year to the other. You will most likely not set aside these kind of indicators. Now, the refresh scenario is, for example, the customer satisfaction. You've been calculating it as a yes or no question, but you have decided it's the right moment to do a refresh. So the KPI name will remain the same, but the calculation formula or the collection method would be different, because you decided that it's not enough at the moment to say whether they've been yes or no satisfied, so satisfied and dissatisfied population, but you would like to have different strategies or different approaches as per getting aligned to a 1 to 5 scale. For example, you would like to have a different strategy for the neutrals, a different strategy for the ones that are highly dissatisfied, giving you a score of 1, and a slightly different or a different strategy to approach the customers that gave you a score of 4 and a score of 5. Maybe some incentives will be embedded so that they can feel more and more satisfied, or maybe you decide to get some different policies about discounts, pricing, to increase their satisfaction. So if it is a yes or a no, your population is separated in only 2 dimensions, but whenever you decide to go for a 1 to 5 scale, you have been just doing a refresh to your KPI. So on the long run, you can see yourself doing this kind of adjustments. It is just a refresh. So if it happens, take it naturally. Suspending a KPI, it means that you're just getting rid of that. It means that it doesn't make any more sense for your strategy to still keep it in your performance architecture. It means that, for instance, you've been introducing the KPI of key percentage of key marketing materials containing errors. You have decided to keep this for 6 months into your reporting tools. Let's say you'll be monitoring this because you had some issues with the review process or with the release of marketing materials. So they've been containing typos, wrong data, wrong information, and stuff like this. But after let's say the marketing division or the marketing department, they've been restructuring their work, you decided that given the fact that the quality assurance has done the job. The results in the last 6 months have been showing green results, and there is no need to keep this KPI in your next performance management cycle. Let's say in 2021, you will eliminate this from the structure. The behavior has been changed, the processes have been changed, it's green, no need to see this anymore. Generally, people fear to eliminate KPIs. People are reluctant to letting it go. They have given the fact that we are now laying on large volumes of data, we are talking about big data, analytics, I think it has derived into people having a behavior of maintaining numbers, like feeling uncomfortable in letting it go. Well, you can just set it aside if it doesn't really make sense anymore. Maybe the efforts of calculating that data are efforts spent in vain, and those efforts could be embedded into other measurement systems or other aspects of the organization. Well, and the fourth scenario, it is when the organization has become more mature in the way of capturing the data. You have decided, instead of measuring the customer satisfaction, going to something more advanced, which in our case would be the Net Promoter Score. You are not asking your customers whether they are satisfied, yes or no. You are not even asking about placing their perceptions on a scale from 1 to 5. Now you are asking the customers about their likelihood of recommending your products and services to others, which indicates you are monitoring now loyalty or a high level of advocacy from the customer, not only the satisfaction as a basic level. Another example is for employees. Employee satisfaction can be replaced with something more mature, which satisfaction for employees would be the satisfaction maybe with the salary, with the working environment, with the equipment. You're going to something more critical. Employee engagement with something more advanced and more mature. You are asking about the employee projections inside the organization, commitment to activities, relationship with the manager, which is something more advanced to be captured. This evolution stage of the KPIs appears as part of a project plan, imagining a project plan for implementation in the stage of learning and improvement, which is stage 13. So after selecting, documenting, designing the system, and activating the system, so starting to collect the data for this, you can end up to the moment of having such self-reflection moments about the evolution. This is the more detailed view of the KPI implementation project, and I decided to insert this in here because we are speaking about long run, already working with KPI systems, mature systems, but most of the times people as well need the foundation to be addressed and integrated, so you can explore also these elements. How long does it take? It's a frequent question. How long does it take to end up in this evolution stage of the KPIs and having such concerns? Well, of course, it can take 6 months, 3 months, or even 3 years. It's not something that you just establish by the design of the implementation. It's a matter of resources, about financial resources, human resources available. So the range is quite large. In here, you have an example of a 3 months implementation, including as well an audit of an initial audit of the system. Getting close to the end of the presentation, reaching the tools, as we've been talking about multiple KPI examples and the approach of connecting KPIs with objectives. Well, the last thing we are going to address is where do we place these KPIs the moment they become active? So the moment we collect data for these. Well, we place this in the scorecard, as I have told you, and I personally prefer to call it this way. The scorecard is the tool that really makes the magic happen in strategy execution. In terms of the structure, on a horizontal perspective, it has the 4 traditional perspectives that we have been through today: financial, customers, internal processes, and people, learning, and growth. Under each perspective, we have the objectives with corresponding KPIs. In terms of the vertical perspective, we have the ID. In here, we have the Smart KPIs number code from the database, reporting frequency. Some KPIs can be maybe monitored. For instance, the employee engagement. You are not going to track employee engagement on a monthly basis, but maybe annually or biannually. Previous result, like past, present, and future. Past, previous result, current result being the present, and the future through the lens of the target, like what you would like to achieve in the future. Who's the owner, and the thresholds. As you can see, the threshold levels are integrated into the scorecard. At some point, you will not even need to look after the KPIs and the results. You will only look by at the colors on the right-hand side. They are quite illustrative. If you see predominantly green, it will give you a comfortable feeling. But if you see it like mostly red, it's an indication of alarm. There's an emergency in taking corrective actions, making decisions towards correcting your results and reaching performance levels, intended performance levels. Hand in hand with the scorecard, which tends to be a more strategic document. Let's say you are looking at the scorecard once a month, or maybe once a quarter, but on a daily basis, or maybe on a weekly basis, you look after the dashboard, which is utilized with a more operational focus. In here, the KPIs are not clustered around the strategic objectives, but they are clustered around, they have clusters or grouping KPIs, sometimes in terms of the processes of the key processes, or the organizational processes, departmental processes, with some data that you would immediately have, like immediately have accessible in case you need to make decisions. You will not wait until the next month to make a decision around something. You will have the dashboard that will give you enough numbers to immediately take decisions, so that in the end you will have the green results. I have seen a super interesting dashboard the moment I've been joining the team of the 911 operators in Spain, in Madrid. They had their office was round. the second floor over the walls, it was like a round open office. They had a large dashboard with graphs and indicators being displayed. One of the KPIs I remember they were tracking was percentage of operators available. So the availability of operators, meaning that I mean the operators were right there on the ground floor. One next to the other, taking the citizens' calls, the emergency calls. They most likely could not afford to have lunch together because otherwise no one else would have been available to answer the citizens' calls, the 911 calls. Therefore, they were measuring this indicator to know whether they need to supplement with resources or not. They even had some indicators about the way their teams in the territory were spread around the city, because some of the areas of the city were having a high likelihood of having accidents during the rush hours. Therefore, they were placing the teams near those areas to have a short intervention time, given this high likelihood. So they were measuring this kind of stuff in the dashboard. They were not waiting 1 month until the performance review meeting was taking place to in order to make their decisions in for their activities. They needed data in real time to make fast decisions, so they were looking after the dashboard. In the scorecard, generally there are KPIs that have a more strategic view. As a difference in between these two questions. Well, it seems like I got quite enthusiastic with the with the topics, but now I would like as well to give you the chance in addressing some of your questions or curiosities about these topics as a question and answer dedicated time.
Well, we've received a first question now, and I believe you've already touched on this point, but you might want to reiterate again. So the KPIs that you have mentioned, would they fit any organization of any size, regardless of how small it may be?
I would say yes, they are applicable. Let's take them one by one. First was the budget variance. Large organizations, small organizations, they can keep track on the the budgets they are planning and the budgets they are spending. Otherwise, it will be like an inertia around the financial areas. You will not know, imagine as a financial team member, as a financial manager, you will not know exactly how much money are these people going to ask from me in the next 6 months or in the next 12 months. So the budget variance, of course, it is widely applicable for both private, public sector organizations. The second was the Net Promoter Score. Again, whenever you have customers, this is applicable to your customers. For the public sector, comparing the private and the public sector, for the private sector, of course, it's a total yes. For the public sector, I would say maybe citizen satisfaction would really work. It's not like I'm going to recommend to someone else working with an authority, because I will have no option to work with someone else, being a centralized system. So in this case, public to private, I would say it's most likely applicable to the private sector and even to the NGOs. But yeah, in the context of having a more mature view on the customer relationship. The third one was active projects on time, budget, and specifications. So whenever an organization is working with projects, is initiating projects, and I think the percent would be around 100% organizations working with this, regardless of being big or small, they can be tracked and monitored. And the last one, the employee engagement. This might have as well a cultural approach. For instance, employee engagement, sometimes in some cultures, I mean, organizations or even nations are not used to take care of employee satisfaction. So when employee satisfaction does not even appear in the context, in the cultural context, of course, we cannot really talk about employee engagement. I've been facing this idea at least two times into projects. The thing is, it is from my point of view, thinking about an organization and the general business processes, you should be careful the way you treat your people, the way you treat your employees, your workforce, and this is applicable. Now, when it is a matter of culture, of course, things become debatable. But generally, I would say it's a total yes. Public sector, yes. Private sector, yes. NGOs, totally agree about the employee engagement, regardless of the size of the organization.
All right. And now we've received another question. How many KPIs would you say are ideal for an individual employee? Like if you have a number in mind, or whether there is such a number.
100, as much as possible. The more the better. Well, no. There's no magic number or magic formula to calculate how many KPIs there should be in a system, but I can give you a hint about how to calculate, like whenever, for instance, maybe you need to answer to this question to know how to approach such a question. Let's take into account the traditional perspectives of the scorecard, which we encourage to appear in each and every architecture. So you will have, implementing, for instance, the framework of the balanced scorecard, you will have 4 perspectives: financial KPIs, customers, internal processes, people, learning, and growth. So at least 4 perspectives in the structure. For each and every perspective, we have assigned objectives, taking into account, let's say, roughly 2 objectives per perspective. Just not to make it 1 and not 5, because it might be too extended. Taking it in between as an assumption, it will give a total of 8 objectives in an architecture, and each objective, as you have seen in the examples, is measured through at least 2 KPIs, which gives, although, for instance, financial, sometimes at the individual level, you will not end up with 2 objectives, sometimes maybe with 1. Maybe for the customers, it can get expanded in here if if the individual is in a department that is generating revenue. Maybe for the functional areas, it's not 2, it's just 1. But roughly, a number would be around, so it's 16 if you take into account 4 times 4, having 2 KPIs per objective. But taking this into account, for instance, at organizational level, let's say making it rounded would be around 20, because the internal processes get a little more diverse. Even the financials get expanded, so it's not only maybe just 2 objectives. When you talk about the database, maybe 20 to 25 organizational level. Again, I'm saying this roughly, just taking into account the balanced score structure. There is no magic number or magic formula behind it, because you don't know exactly the organization's intentions. That's how we come up with KPIs in accordance with the objectives. But the thing is, as per what I have observed, the moment you go to departmental level, to individual level, they tend to be restricted in number. So if you have at the organizational level 30 KPIs, at the department level, generally you have less. And when you get to the team members, part of that department, it can become even less, because you need to take into account as well the job description of the person. So whatever the person is meant to do, in accordance with the performance expectations of the team and the activity, generally the number is decreasing as you get to the lower levels within the organization.
All right. Well, so far we haven't received any other further questions, so I believe this does take us to the end of today's webinar. Raluca, do you have any last words for our listeners?
Well, If you feel interested about the field of working with KPIs and performance management, I would encourage people to access our online certification course. Why not even the face-to-face training course? Sometimes being, given the fact that we are here in an online environment, I think maybe it's more suitable the online course. But exploring the whole framework that I've been just summarizing in this webinar, I would encourage people to access more resources, or at least a database that you can have as a free account, and explore some KPI examples in there if not interested in getting getting involved in educational programs, either as online or face-to-face training. I'm more than happy to have been your host today. I'm enchanted the moment I meet with people that have the same interest, a shared interest in improvement, actually, because performance is happening if you have a personal view around making things better and better and becoming a better person. Thank you very much for your time and attention, and thank you very much, Andre, as well.
Thank you very much once again for your presentation. The KPI Institute appreciates your interest in the webinar KPIs that never get old. Follow our websites and our social media channels to find out more details about our next webinars when they get posted. Also, if you are interested in getting a certification granted by the KPI Institute on vital areas within the performance management discipline, you can explore our scheduled courses on marketplace.kpiinstitute.org. Thank you once again for your participation. We wish you the best of performance and have a nice day.